Welcome to the first episode of Inside the Gym. This is another GymInformer podcast, but this one's going to be a bit different. This one, instead of talking to gym owners and finding out about individual gyms, we're going to take what we've learned over the last several hundred gyms and give you back the information and try to give you, as the gym owner community, the information and the knowledge that we've gained over the last several hundred gyms that we've been to and reviewed and worked out at. So hopefully this works out, and hopefully you find some really great nuggets inside of these podcasts. For this first podcast, we've gotten quite a few messages about explaining equipment variety. Equipment variety is one of the areas that we always review whenever we're reviewing a gym. And we've gotten several messages asking us to get into the nitty gritty of how do we judge equipment variety on gyms. So instead of me just coming on here and talking to you, I invited John Garner as our guest host today. You may have seen the podcast that we did with John. We thought it went great. So we invited John back. He's going to be the guest host. He's going to be asking the questions. So in case you don't know who I am, I'm Chris Gilbert, the founder of GymInformer. So hopefully you'll find this as informative, and we'll get right to it.
Absolutely. So starting off, we know you've been, going over gyms and checking them out and reviewing them for quite a long time now. And as you said, hundreds of gyms. So I guess we can kind of start with how the type of gym affects the way you review it and how you see equipment variety.
So, one of the things that we learned right away was that you really can't judge all gyms evenly. Like, there are fitness centers that really need to be set up very differently than bodybuilding gyms, which need to be set up very differently than powerlifting gyms. And they have different clientele, and the equipment variety necessary for those gyms is very different. So right from the start, we started labeling what type of gym it was, and judging them very differently based on the type of gym.
So variety-wise, when you're looking at, because I know you only review privately owned gyms, not corporate gyms. So within that, how do you view like a powerlifting gym versus bodybuilding gym and kind of grade those equipment varieties? Because powerlifters have different needs than bodybuilders, and a lot of times you see them kind of coexist or commingle, but there are definite powerlifting gyms and definite bodybuilding gyms. So how do you kind of look at that?
Yeah, I think the easiest thing would be probably to start with fitness centers. And fitness centers are the easiest to break down. So if we get that one out of the way, and then talk about the other two, because the other two are a little more challenging. So I think that if we were to start with fitness centers, I think the easiest way to explain how we judge equipment variety for all three is to kind of give you our feeling of this is what an average fitness center looks like. And then that way you can look at your fitness center. If you're a gym owner out there, if you're a gym owner or you're a potential gym owner, you can look in your gym and go, okay, I'm way above that, or I'm not even quite to that level. And then you know that this is where average is from our standpoint. So for an average fitness center, this is the one type of gym that really needs a full circuit of pin loaded equipment. If a fitness center doesn't have a full circuit of pin load equipment, it doesn't even reach the average level. And then the plate loaded equipment for an average fitness center is a lot less required to hit the average level. We feel like a average fitness center needs to have plate loaded equipment to hit each body part. So you don't have to be able to hit incline and decline and flat bench. You don't need 3 different plate loaded chest presses, but you need to be able to hit chest on a plate loaded piece of equipment to be average. Same thing with back. You need to have a plate loaded piece of back equipment. So, and then if you have multiple, then you're above average. You also at a minimum need at least, some place to do bench, some place to do squat, and some place to deadlift. It doesn't have to be multiple to be an average fitness center, but you need to be able to do those somewhere.
Yeah, they have to fit into the mix because if you go to a fitness center gym and there's no spot to deadlift and you're just deadlifting in front of the squat rack or something like that, it feels uncomfortable as a person. Like lifting there, you get weird looks and it's just
Oh,
makes for
totally.
not a very smooth workout. And so having a designated spot for those things does really
Yeah.
change the way you feel when going in and getting a chance to train there.
Oh, I'm saying, and it's great if a fitness center has a deadlifting platform, but I don't feel like that it's necessary to be an average fitness center to have a deadlifting platform. But it's a nice thing. There are
Yeah.
ways to set up areas to deadlift that don't require a deadlift platform that takes up a decent amount of floor space if you're tight on space in a fitness center.
How do you feel about like turf areas? Because I know bodybuilding, powerlifting, and fitness centers, especially ones I've seen lately, all seem to kind of include some sort of turf area. Would you rate that as kind of something that you feel is a priority for a fitness center to have?
Um, I think it's more of a necessity for a fitness center to have it. I think it's a bonus for a bodybuilding gym or a powerlifting gym to have
Oh,
one. For a fitness center to be an average fitness center, you need to have some sort of turf area for people to do stretching, some functional fitness, because that's your clientele.
yeah. You've got
So,
people who are gonna, do some types of CrossFit style workouts, some hit training and different things like that mixed with their training more commonly in those types of gyms. So having that space, I think, really helps. And you hear fitness and that embodies a lot more than just like weightlifting. So it gives you the space in order to do those things.
oh, 100%. And also, fitness centers are the only type of gym that we actually look at the amount of cardio they have. We don't look at cardio. I don't judge cardio on bodybuilding gyms or powerlifting gyms. If they even have cardio, I don't really care. It's not the important part of the gym. But in a fitness center, you need to have not only cardio and a substantial amount of it, but you need to have different types of cardio. You can't be an average fitness center and only have treadmills. You need treadmills, you need step mills, you need bikes. So you need to have at least three different types of cardio equipment to even hit the minimum, hit the average level for a fitness center.
I know there's some specialty cardio pieces that you'll see at some fitness centers, like Jacob's ladders, rowing machines. I forgot what it's called, but I think it's like the skier, things like that that
Mm-hmm.
you don't see super
Like the
common. They're
ellipticals
kind of
and
exciting to use.
yeah, I think those are fun to use. If you have them, cool. From the most fitness center managers and owners that I've talked to, um, they're kind of bonuses. Some of them they get used actually less than the average pieces of equipment or the more uniform pieces of equipment that everyone has, just because people don't understand them.
Yeah,
And
they don't know
fitness
how to use
centers
it.
are often an entry level place for people to start going to the gym. And if you get too specialized in your pieces of equipment, or if you get a piece of cardio equipment that takes a lot of adjustment and a lot of setup, people don't want to play with that. So be careful about spending a lot of money on specialized cardio.
Yeah, because niche specialized pieces of equipment are cool, but they just end up taking up space commonly. And that's
Mhm.
kind of what I've seen is like, oh, it's cool to have this, but then you never find time to actually use it because it doesn't fit into what the plan is. Especially if you think of a fitness center, people are going off of more generic training plans that they maybe find on the internet or have, a very run of the mill standardized coach that's, pretty simplified. And so any workout they're following isn't going to include some specialized piece of equipment that you might have from a specialized coach for a specialized sport. And then that might be included.
Oh, 100%. And even Jacob's ladders. I've seen Jacob's ladders in tons and tons of fitness centers. And when I've talked to the owners, they've been flat out honest that it's probably one of the least used pieces of fitness equipment in the gym.
I hear they break a lot too, and the maintenance cost is pretty high on them.
Yeah. So, as far as your cardio goes, don't get crazy. Be careful with where you're spending your money. And, sometimes with cardio, if you're in a fitness center, less, less bells and whistles, but more pieces is probably your better bet. So,
Do you find that having like a standardized brand becomes more important in a fitness center where everything looks more uniform than like a specialized powerlifting or bodybuilding gym where kind of some brand variety is more expected? So, for
um,
example, like Life Fitness or Hammer Strength is like, or Precore, and they have almost the entire matching line, or do you find that it doesn't really make too much of a difference?
I think that for the entry level clientele, it's it's nice to have that uniform look and feel just because like the fitness center that I go to on a frequent basis has all hammer strength equipment. It's all their pin loader equipment from hammer strength, and all the adjustments are exactly the same. So if you're new to the gym and you know how to adjust this piece of equipment and somebody else and they've got a bunch of hammer strength, but then they've also got some hoist and some prime, and if they stretch themselves and got some prime pin load equipment, adjusting a prime pin
It's
loaded piece of equipment is an entirely different world than adjusting a hammer strength piece of equipment.
That
So,
requires an entire knowledge base on
oh, it
movement
does.
patterns and the strength curve of a movement and what you're trying to load. And the average person doing a leg extension doesn't really care which range they're loading. They just care they're doing a leg extension.
Right. Yeah. So while I don't necessarily think that it has to be pin loaded equipment all from the same brand, it should be definitely pin loaded equipment that people can easily figure out and doesn't have tons of adjustments. I think Prime's a little overdone for a fitness center. Love Prime. It's one of my favorite brands of equipment. But it's
They
not really
got
fitness
their
center stuff.
patent from Strive, correct? I think it was
Hmm.
Strive was the original company. Because I've seen some
Yeah.
pieces with the same technology from Strive.
Yeah. And the Strive pin loaded equipment, if you find any of it, it doesn't have the adjustments necessarily that the new Prime has. So Prime started with when they went to Prime, they started changing the um, resistance range on their pin loaded equipment the way their plate loaded equipment is. But a lot of the old Strive stuff doesn't have that same um, like resistance change.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
but if you want to, we can get into powerlifting gyms. That seems to be the next easiest one to explain.
Yeah, I find bodybuilding gyms become a little bit more technical because there's a lot more needs on the strength curve and contractility and movement pattern and kind of where you're trying to load and what you're trying to accomplish than, for lack of a better way to put it, moving weight within powerlifting, because
Oh
powerlifting
yeah,
is focused on
yeah.
moving weight. Yeah. So
When we were trying to set what the average equipment was for these different types of gyms, um, setting the average for a bodybuilding gym was the most challenging. Um, the fitness centers were the easiest. Powerlifting gyms were almost as easy setting an average as fitness centers. So for a powerlifting gym to be average, you need to have multiple competition level places to squat. You need to have multiple competition level places to bench and multiple deadlift platforms with competition rated bars and competition plates. Outside of that, for your accessory equipment, you need to have accessory equipment available to hit each body part. Much like an average fitness center needs plate loaded equipment to hit each body part, a powerlifting gym needs accessory equipment to hit each body part to be average. They don't need multiple to be average. I mean, I've been to some powerlifting gyms out there that have some ridiculous amount of accessory equipment. Some of them have more accessory equipment than bodybuilding gyms. But just to be an average powerlifting gym, you need to have a chest press. You need to have some way to hit back that's not just deadlifting. Your competitors need to be able to accessorize their lifts and build muscle differently than just and as stabilizers, and to be able to do some accessories, not just the three main lifts.
yeah, because when you look at powerlifting, you're training a movement and you're training a movement pattern, and then you're training the weak points of that pattern. So if someone's weak in the end range of a bench press, they need some sort of tricep movement. And having variety besides just dumbbells to do that makes for more options within training, more exciting excitement within training, and less injury risk when you can change up your variation. Because when you do the same exercise over and over and over again, your risk of injury with that movement can become a little higher. So having just another option definitely helps out. And like you said, if there's more variety, great, but you just need options.
Yeah, you have to have options for each body part. Having a monolift is great, but I don't think a monolift is a necessity to be an average level powerlifting gym.
I would agree. If I'm looking for a powerlifting gym and in a powerlifting, I want to see one, but the practicality to actually use it's just next level. It's like, oh, cool. And if you got a group of guys, but to just be able to go in and power lift, you don't need a monolift. You can't really use it by yourself the way it's intended to be used anyway.
Right.
And if someone's new to powerlifting, there's no application for them to try to even use it on their own. The setting up safety chains, everything becomes more complicated. But just having a standard good squat rack, competition squat racks, benches, that means more to the average competitor because that's what's more likely to be seen. And now a lot of organizations are using monoliths, but you don't have to actually use the monolift in a meet as a monolift. You can choose to walk it out just like you would a squat rack. So it's one of those, like you said, it's a bonus. It's cool to see, but I know people who powerlift who will never touch a monolift. They just don't.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, you can have a row full of Texas power racks where you can get your competition benches in, you can get your squats in, and some deadlift platforms. And from a 3 main lift standpoint, that would cover you. And then have your accessory equipment, and that would cover you to be what I would consider an average powerlifting gym. I mean, squat racks are great. You don't actually have to have them if you have, power racks.
I would agree. And then when it comes to powerlifting versus like a fitness center, like bar variety, different types of bars, you mentioned competition bars. Would you say to be average, having bar variety such as cambered bars, safety squat bars, earthquake bars, or Yukon bar? Like, I mean, there's multiple kinds of bars. Do you think when does the bar variety become average to above average? Do you think just having competition bars and deadlift bars, squat bars is enough? Or do you think that they should have those specialty bars to be average?
I think that just having the competition level bars is enough to be average. Um, most most powerlifting gyms who are even at the average level have some other bars, just because most powerlifting gyms that are on that average scale aren't overly huge. We're talking, 2 to 6,000 square feet gyms. They're not huge facilities, most of them. So adding different bars gives their members a little more variety of lift and a little more things they can do in the small space. Adding in adding in all of the different bars can change, things. You can add, if you're benching with a kabuki bar, it gives you a different feel and a different movement and changes how everything feels and how everything moves than if you're just benching with a straight bar. So.
For sure. Yeah, I like using some specialty bars, but it kind of goes back to the specialty cardio equipment. Most of them don't get used very often, except for advanced lifters. And they're going to be looking for some different variations, or they're going to be working around injuries that maybe the earlier lifter won't be. And it's powerlifting. At the end of the day, it's squat, bench, deadlift with a barbell in your hand. So those are going to be, I guess, what's really, truly needed.
Yeah, and if you're starting a powerlifting gym or you've got a powerlifting gym and you want to grow it or you want to add some stuff for your members, ask your members. They'll tell you what they want. They'll tell you what they need. If you're not 100% sure, ask them or reach out to some of the powerlifting gym owners that we've talked to, that we've reviewed, or that we've had on the podcast. They're all great people, and I'm sure they'd be happy to help if you're not sure what to get.
There's a small gym I used to work at, and one of the trainers, what he did there to help out the owners was every day he was in the gym, he made a list of every piece of equipment in the gym, and he'd put a check mark next to every time he saw somebody using a piece of equipment, and they found the most used and least used pieces of equipment. The things that weren't touched at all within like a 30-day span, they got rid of in order to make new space for things that their members wanted, and they left a list out, hey, what would you like to see in the gym? And then anything that was on there, like the top 5, are what they replaced those pieces of equipment with. And I thought that was a cool way to do it because they directly looked at who's using it and then who wants something different and what they want. And we're able to take that feedback and apply it. because I've seen some gyms where they just keep swapping out pieces of equipment, but they're just grabbing random stuff that they find interesting, new, or shiny, and the members are like, man, this doesn't help me at all, and the majority and it still doesn't get used, or it just becomes just a new chest press every 6 weeks, 12 weeks. It's not any better per se, or it's not an
Oh,
upgrade. It's just a lateral movement.
oh, 100%. Yeah. Um, so then to the challenging part, getting into bodybuilding gyms and equipment variety. I honestly talked to quite a few people, surveyed quite a few people about really hammering this down because I didn't want this just to be my opinion. I mean, granted, I've been to probably at this point more gyms than anyone else in the country in the last 2.5 years.
Probably the
But
planet.
at the same time, I wanted to make sure that before we put this information out there and told people this is what we're calling an average bodybuilding gym, that it was a well-rounded consensus. So, what we came up with for a bodybuilding gym to be average is not only do you, I mean, obviously from the start, you have to have your barbell pieces of equipment. I mean, you have to have some squat racks, you have to have some benches, you have to have some variety there. That goes without saying, I feel like. But then the real meat comes in your plate loaded equipment. You do not need a full circuit of pin loaded equipment. The real meat comes in your plate loaded equipment. You need some pin loaded equipment to accessorize those plate loaded pieces of equipment, but the real meat is in those plate loaded pieces. And for a gym to be at least average, or I guess for an average bodybuilding gym, what we decided is that they've got several different pieces of equipment for each body part in a plate loaded fashion, but they're all from the same manufacturer. When you get in there and you hit multiple different manufacturers with multiple different pieces of equipment for the same body part, then you're getting above average and really good. For
Yeah.
average, we're talking about somebody went in, bought a full line of Arsenal plate loaded equipment, put it in their gym. Arsenal's great equipment, but if that's all you have in your gym, even if you have a lot of it, you're still an average bodybuilding gym.
Because the nuances between equipment variety, like if you go and use Arsenal, there's some machines where and you only understand this if you've used it, where the movement pattern feels great, the contraction's great, you feel good, but then another piece just doesn't quite hit. But there's another brand that maybe does of that piece, and that's when, like you said, you start getting above average. You start piecing those together like a puzzle of the best movement patterns, the best strength curve, and the best variety.
And it'll be different from one person to the next.
Yeah, like if
Because
my arms are longer and the guy I'm working out, his arms are shorter, he may love a machine while I might hate that machine.
yeah, like you're much bigger than I am. You're a much stronger guy than I am. So you might love, a particular piece of equipment that might not work for me. And at 50, almost 52 years old, flexibility is a struggle for me. So certain pieces are really great for me, and certain pieces I struggle with. So it depends. So when you get the different manufacturers in there, you're gonna find pieces that are great for a much wider variety of people. And even the same person, you'll find if you have a chest press from Arsenal and one from Prime and one from Atlantis, even the same person, it will feel differently to them. So they might decide to use one for a while and then move to another one just because the strength curve is different on each one of those pieces of equipment. And you're going to get your really serious lifters a bit more variety by just changing the manufacturers.
I would say like I'm very much a logbook style training person where it's like I follow the same workout plan for X number of weeks, if not months, and I hit the same thing. And then at the point of that, it's like, okay, I've got my movement patterns as a template, and then I've got my machines that I use. And my chest, let's say it's incline chest press, it might be a Smith machine. A few weeks later, let's say 9, 10 weeks later, it's a chest press. Well,
Hmm.
then it's an Arsenal's chest press. Okay, now it's the Atlantis chest press. Okay, now I'm going to use the prime because I want to load the shortened range or the end range a little bit more. And so that gives you that variety within a workout plan to just swap out. And as a coach, it's a lot of fun because you can build that variety for clients and keep training exciting for them rather than having to completely swap total movement out or completely change your workout. Just changing
Yeah.
a piece of equipment is enough to get like a new stimulus to keep progress moving
Hmm.
forward.
Yeah. And like I was in a gym recently that was all Arsenal. Outside of their leg room, their entire upper body was all Arsenal. It was still a really good gym. And if it wasn't for the leg space where they put in multiple pieces of Atlantis and Rogers and some other stuff, some Watson, it would have been an average gym. Um, and a lot of people would be shocked that this gym would be average, but for a bodybuilding gym, you've got to really put in the extra. You can't just open up a catalog and say, give me that, and really make a great bodybuilding gym.
I think a lot of it comes down to whoever's opening that gym and their knowledge of like different styles of training and different sports
Hmm.
as well. Because if you get someone who is passionate about bodybuilding, loves bodybuilding, but they don't personally bodybuild and they don't personally train that way, the all Atlantis or all Arsenal strength equipment looks really pretty. It sounds really flashy. It takes great photos. And they're like, look at what I created. But then it leaves you wanting more. It's kind of like going out to eat at a restaurant and just you're not quite satisfied with the ate. Like it was good. It's just not quite what you wanted to get out of it. Same thing with the workout is it looks pretty, but it doesn't deliver the way you'd want it to. And I think a lot of people get the face value of wanting everything to look pretty and it doesn't quite feel as good. And when you can marry that and make everything flashy and pretty, where people walk in and go, wow, but they also get a workout that makes them, feel like the sky's the limit,
Right.
that,
Yeah.
that
100%.
becomes exceptional.
And there are gyms out there that do an amazing job with one brand. Not a lot, but there are a few. But they also have a dedicated powerlifting area or a dedicated functional fitness area. They have more to offer their clientels than just a room full of Atlantis equipment or a room full of Arsenal equipment. So they give people more than just that room. If you're going to have just that room full of that equipment, then there's your average.
How do you find that like kettlebells, bands, TRX, and things like that fit into the different gyms? So like a fitness center versus a bodybuilding gym and a powerlifting gym, and then the role that bands, kettlebells, and like TRXs and things like that fit into those.
I honestly think they're kind of all over the place, honestly. Um, you'll find quite a few slightly above average fitness centers that have a better assortment of bands than some really high end bodybuilding gym. You'll find really good assortments of kettlebells at some like above average fitness centers. And I'm not even talking about fitness centers that are in the 4.5 or 4 range. I'm talking fitness centers in the 3.5 range for equipment variety. A lot of them, well, not a lot, but there are quite a few that I've come across that have like a good assortment of bands and a good assortment of kettlebells. Like they don't have J bells and things like
Yeah.
that, but who does have J bells?
It's not common. Or like the fat bells. I don't know if you've ever used like
Yeah.
the fat bells.
Hmm.
They feel pretty good. They're weird if you're not used to them, but it's an interesting piece. And if you find a gym that has like a full set of those, again, that's one of those wow. But most people aren't going to use them over a dumbbell because they're used to dumbbells, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, J bells and things like that, the specialty pieces are almost 100% confined to powerlifting gyms or bodybuilding gyms.
Yeah.
Like, or the Kabuki dumbbells. If you've seen those
Yeah.
are almost always powerlifting gyms or bodybuilding gyms. But I've seen bands at all different levels of gyms. I've even seen chains at one or two fitness centers. Chains are almost always
It's
powerlifting
rare
or
when you see
bodybuilding
them.
gyms. It's
I
rare
think
that
that
you
normally
see it.
happens when they've got like a couple members who like to power lift and
Hmm.
then they throw them in there, or you get someone who likes to watch The Rock train and they're like, oh, he puts chains on his neck to do dips. Let's throw him in the gym. It'll look cool. And
Hmm.
it's really funny to me to watch how different people apply the use of those chains. That's something that can be interesting from a coach standpoint and sometimes there's like, oh, that person's using them in a way that makes sense, and sometimes people just throw them into something to have fun. But that's one that's, I think, kind of for a fitness center, like oh wow, that's pretty cool that they have that.
And I think, I mean, now that we're thinking about it, I actually think that fitness, I've seen more fitness center supply bands than I've seen bodybuilding gym supply bands.
I was actually going to say, I think that's one of the missing links I see at some bodybuilding gyms, like where I personally train. They don't have any bands for their members, and I know a lot of members abuse bands and they break and they go through them, but they're not super expensive. And there's a lot of things you can add bands to from a warm up, from a rehab prehab
Mhm.
perspective, and then just from a training perspective. Like adding bands to equipment can really, you know,
Oh,
you
it
can
changed
take
the
a
picture.
run of the mill machine and then change it and make it more dynamic by
Mhm.
applying bands. So that's, I think, a missing link. Um, I don't know, like whether, I guess, above average would be a good set of bands at a bodybuilding gym. I guess because
Yeah, I
different.
mean, if a bodybuilding gym was above average, they'd probably have some bands. There's equipment, and I think there's accessory equipment, if that makes sense. And maybe we'll do another episode at
Yeah,
some point on accessory equipment. Um, but I kind of feel like bands are an accessory equipment, whereas they're a nicety, but because bands are small and they're not that expensive, people I've talked to in bodybuilding gyms that are really serious and like using bands just bring their own.
yeah, and that's me. I brought my own for a few years now, and I plan on using bands. And so do a lot of powerlifters I know, especially because wear and tear, right? Like if you've got bands, someone's tearing them up.
Hmm.
I don't know if you've ever had a band break while using it for a deadlift or a squat. It's not a fun feeling. So if you can trust your bands and know the condition of those bands, there's like a confidence thing there when you're using them too. But
Yeah, and if you're serious and you're pushing a lot of weight and you're pushing things pretty serious, having your own set of bands is a lot safer than using bands that you don't know who used that band last
yeah,
or what they did to it. Because I've seen some people doing some crazy things in some crazy videos with bands. Like,
yeah,
granted, most of them were with purple equipment in the background, but
yeah. We won't
holy
have to say who those are. Everybody
cow.
knows.
Right.
When it comes to like equipment between bodybuilding and powerlifting gyms, what are some examples of some differences in equipment you think would be good for people to know to be like average? Like, for example, like a Smith machine, in my opinion, is something that I think every bodybuilding gym should have at least one, while a powerlifting gym, I don't see a need. Would you agree with that?
Um, I don't think that to be an average powerlifting gym, you have to have a Smith machine. I think a Smith machine it's a nice accessory
Yeah.
if you have the space for it and you want to add it. For a bodybuilding gym, it's almost like you have to have one.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. And
Um,
that's something just like we talked about equipment, like the model lift you brought up from powerlifting gyms, reverse hyper. It's every gym owner I've talked to pretty much is I want to have one, but it's the most expensive table I have in my gym. Is because a lot of people end up just putting stuff on top of it, holding the gym bag on top of it, and not actually using it. And I don't know why that ends up being. I think some of it's people don't know how to use it. I think some of it's just it's uncomfortable. Nobody likes a lower back pump. A lower back pump doesn't feel good, and
mhm.
that machine is designed to give you a lower back pump,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah, and I think that for as far as that piece, that is one of those like that. It's not cheap. It takes up a decent amount of space, and probably doesn't get used that often, especially in a bodybuilding gym.
Yeah,
I've seen them used far more often in powerlifting gym just because one, they were invented by Louis Simmons. And two, it's having that strong lower back is so important in powerlifting that I think that it's a vital piece if you're going to be an above average powerlifting gym. Um, there's so many other ways, some like pump in your lower back, from a bodybuilding standpoint that I don't think they're as important in a bodybuilding gym.
I found where I see them used most within a bodybuilding gym ends up being women using them for their glutes. And you'll find them doing like some sort of glute kickback variation or just a raise with just like a single leg. And I've seen that far more than I've seen men actually using them, which is something I
Yeah,
found
yeah, I've seen them
interesting.
used quite a bit in powerlifting gyms, but I mean, those are competitors who understand the importance and understand what they're there for, and have probably seen the West Side Barbell documentary, and you know,
Started to try it out. Yeah.
right, I mean, they saw that Louis broke his back, and created this piece of equipment to strengthen up his lower back, and then went back to squatting 800 pounds after he broke his back. So, I mean, from a powerlifting standpoint, those things are awesome. But from a bodybuilding standpoint, I mean, they're nice, but I think you could put a piece of equipment in your gym that would take up the same amount of space and spend the same amount of money that people would use it far more often.
Yeah, absolutely.
Same thing with go ahead.
I was gonna say, especially like when you're trying to consider, most gyms aren't going to be your 20,000 square foot meccas. Most gyms, aren't to that scale, especially when you talk about somebody privately owned opening up their first gym. Most people aren't opening up a massive fitness center that has all these rooms and all this space they're trying to fill. They're trying to maximize the small amount of space they have for the members that they have or clientele that they want.
Oh, 100%. And, if we're going to talk about, those sorts of things like equipment to equipment, I think that a belt squat is super important for a powerlifting gym. I don't necessarily think that a belt squat is equally as important for a bodybuilding gym. I think that having like a Rogers power squat is a better piece of equipment for a bodybuilding gym than if you had to pick between that and a belt squat. I mean, do you have the same opinion?
Yeah, 100%. Because you think about the importance of squatting and bodybuilding is far less important than powerlifting. Some people might argue that when they're like die hard for squats, but if we're being honest, you don't need to squat to bodybuild. You have to squat to powerlift. So if you can find another way to work a squat pattern that's not inducing as much fatigue and allows you to, do more and recover more efficiently, a belt squat's going to do that more than a leg press will. Or like a Roger squat that's, an actual machine, doesn't require you to actually move through a movement pattern to stabilizing yourself. The machine's doing it for you. The belt squat still keeps it free of enough movement to train the movement pattern of the squat itself, not just to worry about load.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that if we were to get into specific pieces of equipment from the different types of gyms, there are definitely pieces that some gyms need more than others. And we could probably talk for the next hour about breaking down like specific pieces of equipment. But I think I think we've kind of given a pretty good definition of what an average gym is. I think that, hopefully this was helpful to people out there. Thanks, John, for coming in and putting in your input into this first podcast. I'm excited about the next several episodes we've got lined up. So if you have questions, shoot us and put a comment here if you'd like to know more, or shoot us a message on Instagram if you'd like to know more about how we feel about Equipment Variety or anything else. If you have topics that you'd like us to cover on this new Inside the Gym podcast, because this podcast we're creating specifically for gym owners and potential gym owners. We found that this is our community. These are the people that really pay attention to what we're doing and are excited about what we're doing. And we want to try to create more tools for you guys and hopefully take some of the information and the things that we've learned and give them back to you and help people who want to open these badass gyms, get started right and not have to struggle. I mean, gyms are one of the fastest or one of the businesses that go out of business the fastest. So if we can help people get started the right way by watching some of these podcasts and learning some things ahead of time, then that'll be awesome. So
yeah, because if someone can take this and these podcasts and things that we talk about and apply that, and that actually helps them with their business, that's a win. Because, you think about the amount of money it costs to start a good gym, and if you spend the money in the wrong places, you're not helping yourself out. But if you can kind of piece together the information you need to do it right the first time, like you said, that's valuable right there.
Oh, 100%. And, that's what we're here for. We love the locally owned gym community, and whatever we can do to strengthen that community, then we're going to do it. So hopefully you guys found this helpful, and be on the lookout for the next few episodes. Thanks again, John, for coming back. And
Absolutely.
I'm sure you guys will see John on future episodes. So thank you again, and give us a like, give us a follow, and hopefully you enjoyed this. If you enjoyed this podcast,
please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more great content.